You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the show where we take a wander around the week in Apple news, reviews, technology, associated products, and all sorts of other things that catch our eye. This is another episode of the Essential Apple Podcast. Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode. A slightly different sort of episode this week, as I am very privileged to have with me a man who was part of the development team for the Global Positioning System, a technology that is now taken for granted, but as you will find out, something that went from obscurity to ubiquity. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the show Mr. David Acklam. Hello, David, and how are things with you in Arizona?
We have a beautiful day here in sunny Arizona.
Been pretty murky here, wet, windy.
Oh.
We've had a westerly front crossing the country, but they say it's going to pass over tonight, and the next couple of days are going to be northerly winds, bright and crisply cold.
Well, just in time for Santa Claus.
Yeah, unlikely. I know, over here it'll probably just turn back to wet and windy again. That's British weather for you. That is British weather.
Yeah, I sent you a little reminder of, we did spend some time in London.
Right, yeah, I've got that. I think that might be the show art, actually.
And we did. I sent you that picture of the couple of the main players there, and of course you can see yours truly in the kind of the brown leather jacket behind me. That's your Royal Navy. He's retired now. That's Johnny Cardale.
Okay.
I believe he's a Lord Lieutenant. You might understand that royal stuff.
Yeah.
But Johnny and I, about the same age, and was very interesting. And then the fella next to me on my left there, that's Kurt Tremmel. He was a lieutenant colonel in the German Luftwaffe. He used to fly F-104 starfighters, which were kind of widowmakers.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the widowmakers.
And then standing next to him, oh boy, I'm going to forget his name now. Oh, he was our Canadian representative, Bob. What was Bob's last name? Anyhow, the years have gone by and they've taken their toll. But many of the things that were tried to squeeze into that wonderful video that Tom Sylvester put together, the documentary, there's probably enough for 20 more documentaries that are lying on the cutting room floor.
I'm sure there are. It was a good documentary. I enjoyed it.
I really appreciated what Tom did. He captured the essence of so many people, put so much effort in, and I feel bad because most of the stuff I tried to get squeezed into his interview was talking about some of the people that generally don't get the recognition, that the troops in the trenches, so to speak, the people that made each of our little chests happen, the people that flew our helicopters, the people that prepared the helicopters, the other vehicles that were not included in there, because it was kind of really aimed at our Air Force effort. But I was a Air Force officer living on an Army post out in the middle of the desert in Yuma, and the Army just treated myself and our family wonderful out there. But I got so exposed to our sister service. And then, of course, we had 8 other participating countries from members of NATO, including the UK. And what was not included in there was the many trips across the pond to demonstrate to each of the participating countries' Ministry of Defense, MODs, what their tax dollars was being spent on. how do you convince somebody back in the 70s that, oh, we're going to actually listen to satellites and we're going to tell you where you're at very accurately?
Yeah.
And they go, well, why? I can look at a map. I can read street signs. I think I know where I'm at. Well, it's kind of interesting today how we just take that for granted that, oh, I just looked at my GPS, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bit that got me at the end of the documentary was I can't remember which one it was, but he was laughing when he pointed to his Apple Watch and saying, like, all that work we did, and now it fits inside my Apple Watch and costs about $1.50.
Yep, that was yours truly. I kind of goofed up on the date. My memory gets goofed up, but I did get this gag gift on my Air Force retirement.
Yeah, that's you were saying the thing about the
Yeah, and
um
unfortunately, he didn't put the picture of that watch in there. But I have to chuckle is that boy, it came true a lot sooner than I ever expected.
yeah, what was it, Casio Man 1999, I think he.
I said 99, and I'm looking at it because I have it hanging on my wall in my little wall of honor. It was GPS Manpack 1991.
Oh well,
But you could see in the picture I sent you in Hyde Park there, that was the smallest GPS unit we had in 1979. And that thing weighed 27 pounds. It had two lithium batteries that were actually batteries built for the military radio folks for operating certain radios. I think it was a PRC 77 radio. But the lithium battery was kind of new technology, and there was a lot of concern about these things could explode if you shorted them out. They would overheat, and
yeah. If
we,
you've ever
we
seen
got
if you've ever seen a video of one go off,
oh, and
it's
the funny
amazing that
part about it.
it's amazing any of us are prepared to put one in our pockets, really. But
Exactly. And if you saw the size of these batteries, I mean, these things are like small motorcycle batteries. There was two of them in there, and that was a good half of the weight. But the way they were designed is they used hydrogen sulfide within each of the cells to passivate the lithium, so to keep them from going, I guess, overloading. But the problem is that if they started to discharge too fastly, there was a pressure relief valve, and we had one go off in one of the units. Somebody shorted the battery out in a conference room, and it took probably over a year for the conference room to stop smelling like rotten eggs.
yeah,
Let alone that one manpack unit it stunk for its duration. So little
old
bits of humor
Stinky.
and stuff that it's those anecdotes that it's fun to share, and of course as the years go by, little by little they fade, and so this is kind of a pleasure just to kind of share a few of these with you.
No, that's fine, absolutely fine. So, I obviously you sent me your bio, David. Man, you've done a lot of things.
Well, life has been fun.
You've done a lot of things. What we got here? I mean, let me see. I'll put it in the show notes for all the listeners to have a look at. But where are we? Oh dear, I see you're an engineer. What we got here? Professional engineer.
Inactive though, I am retired, so I
Well,
don't
yes,
practice anymore.
yeah, no,
But I do have the license, but
yeah.
it says retired.
It does say yes, inactive. BSEE. So what's that? Electrical engineering. I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
that's Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering.
Yeah, at the University of Arizona. Air
Right.
Force officer, 1966 to 87. Test engineer with Texas Instruments. And then obviously there's all the GPS thing. And I I had to laugh at the title, the Lonely Halls. It sounds like an epic by by J.R.R. Tolkien, doesn't it? Or
It was at all. I said, Tom, why? I didn't quite understand why he was calling that, and then I had to go and look at the script, and I go, oh, he Brad actually did say that in one of his write-ups.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's mentioned. Yeah, they do explain it, don't they? But yeah, the documentary is called The Lonely Halls, a Lonely Halls meeting, I think.
Yes.
And yeah, they explain that it was named that because they first met in the Pentagon on was it Labor Day weekend? I think they said.
Yeah, it was a Labor Day weekend, and of course that was back when money was tight and energy was tight, and so they would turn the air conditioners off, and turn the lights off to kind of save on the electric bill. And
So it was all
I know
deserted. There we go. Apart from
the
the crew plotting to develop GPS.
it was it's one of those things again that in the very beginning there was so many different efforts to develop navigation systems, and of course at that time the primary military systems that were used. Navy had their transit system, and the Air Force and the other land-based units would depend on what was called TACAN and radar type navigation systems, and then some of the early developments of what they call Doppler navigation. But how do you sit there and have satellite navigation? Oh, that sounds intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that surprised me is working with our Navy folks. If you think back in that generation, we had these horrible oil tankers running aground on reefs and stuff, and of course having disastrous oil spills. At that time, back in the 50s and 60s, they didn't really know their position in that big ocean very well. And the one navigation system that they used, I believe it was a transit system, if they got on the wrong wavelength, they could be 60 nautical miles off course. And no wonder they ran into reefs.
No.
It's just amazing that people, of course, the average person that's not involved with that type of business never really thought much about it and say, well, can't those sailors sail better than that? They run right into the doggone reef, But yeah, now you understand. And of course, today it's funny when you hear that people are following their navigation system in their car and they run into a lake or something because the map didn't match where they thought they were. And I hear lots of people, even to this day, that'll complain about, well, my GPS didn't put me in the right place. And I'm going, well, the GPS actually knew where you were at. Yeah. The map was not accurate.
Exactly. The map that your application is using to direct you is not correct.
It is so important that people don't understand that the Defense Mapping Agency here in the United States, back during when we were developing this stuff, had a very limited surveyed point of positions on what we call Earth, and those positions tied to an Earth center, Earth fixed point mathematically, and that's moved around. Back when we were developing it was World Geodetic Survey 1976, I believe, and I don't know what the latest one. I know they shortly after they gone operational, it was WGS 84. But just knowing what the Earth actually looks like mathematically, then merging that with what the GPS is, well, I know where I'm at, and here's where it is as of this moment in time. It's simple in one terms. On the other hand, extremely complicated, and it's amazing where Brad pointed out in the end that this thing's maintained by a half a dozen enlisted Air Force members up in Colorado, maintaining the accuracy of where those satellites are in space. So that was, I think, a real tribute to how this program has evolved.
Well, I mean, I have to say, talking about, it's a fascinating documentary because it takes you all the way through, and obviously it's pitched for people like me as outsiders to get a handle on how it developed and the hurdles that had to be overcome and so on. I mean, there's the bit about how many satellites that you need and at what height you'll get. If we go for we'd like to have a 12-hour rotation, but that's too high. We haven't got a booster big enough to get the satellites that far out, and there was all that. And then so that I could kind of that's all fairly physical stuff. I could visualize all that. I could see all that. How you're trying to make that work. But then he got to the bit where he said, of course, because of the gravity well, and we're that far out, and we're traveling at X speed, there's a relativistic effect. And
yes, good old Einstein.
And that was the bit where the guy goes, so we have to calculate the time difference, and it's so many 10 to the minus 19 the thing, and then you have to adjust by that. And I'm like, my head has exploded. My mind has been blown at that point. you know.
The other thing that was really lost in that, of course, now GPS all fits in a $1.50 chip that we carry around in our computers, our laptops, our iPads, our watches, etc. But back in the 70s, when this thing was being developed, we didn't really have personal computers. Our group out of Yuma was kind of lucky. We had an Apple II that our secretary did most of the typing up of our test reports and that on. And of course, she became my secretary when I took over the unit. But I had an old Atari 800 system that we set up a simple modem connection so I could at least work a little bit from home and communicate with the office in those days. But the GPS solutions themselves were heavily dependent upon Kalman filtering theory, which ties a lot into matrix inversions mathematically. And to do a 9 by 9 matrix inversion on an old 8-bit computer literally was next to impossible to do in real time. So if you looked at that little man-pack picture that I sent you, that 27-pound unit, that basically, I believe, was a PDP-9 computer repackaged in there to run off these 2 lithium batteries to be able to do the Kalman filtering solution. And the top of that, which people don't think much about today, is the antenna, because GPS operated at a frequency that was up in the microwave. And microwaves back in them days pretty much depended on what we call plumbing, waveguides. And so that had very, very small waveguide plumbing inside the top of that unit there. And of course, that antenna, which a lot of the folks that we'd show it to said, "Oh, it comes with a nice, easy to hold handle." Well,
Yeah,
don't touch it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Don't touch it. But when you look at what has happened today, and I guess that's Moore's law, the technology just grows exponentially. And I had to chuckle, with the watch thing and getting the gag gift at retirement. That I go, well, you know what? The way the computer business was growing exponentially, it wouldn't surprise me that I would see in my lifetime something as small as that watch. Well,
Yeah,
we know what it is today,
we
and
do indeed.
it is there.
It's that.
Some of the other things that on the bio, and it's been really a blessed career for me. Has been after retiring. Of course, I kind of joke. I say, after all those years, some 37 years in guns and bullets, in the defense business, it was time to give back. So I spent the last, since 2003, working primarily aiming at, we call it STEM. I imagine it's familiar to you: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But now we're advocating STEAM. We want the arts and humanity in there, because we can't all be engineers. You can't all be mathematicians. And, the arts and humanities are important, even if you are an engineer or a scientist or whatever. But there's a lot more to what goes on in life than just crunching numbers. So I've been very involved in that. And the University of Arizona, which I'm an alum of, has the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, which was in the College of Science where I got my master's degree in. They tagged me early on in a NASA mission that the university was the first time they led to land a spacecraft on Mars, called the Phoenix Mars Lander. And I got asked to join the advisory board. And then they said, we really need to share this with the community. So I took over what we call the Kuiper Circle. And that's named after the founder of the Lunar and Planetary Labs, Gerard Kuiper. And it's basically an education and outreach to the local community in southern Arizona here. And I've been doing that since 2006. But along with doing that outreach, I had the wonderful experience to work closely with the principal investigator and team that landed this and operated this lander, Mars lander. Back in 2008, we actually got on the surface, and it was there for a little over 3 months before winter set in, and it got buried in frozen carbon dioxide. But then on top of that, now we just arrived with the latest NASA program, the OSIRIS-REx mission. And of course, once the Phoenix mission was over, and they started working on the program to try to win the OSIRIS-REx program, I became an ambassador with them, again, reaching out to our youth and that in the community here. But boy, it's really exciting, and some of the things that people don't realize is that our our NASA folks there, they have ambassador programs that work with the kids in middle school and high school. And I know when we were on Mars, they had chosen certain people from various parts of the states here that worked with a NASA scientist and brought them out to our operations center and had them work for 2 weeks with the scientists and that, actually doing science on Mars. And then at the end of their 2 weeks, they had to put a PowerPoint presentation together to the principal investigator, Dr. Smith, and present what they had learned in those 2 weeks. And just the fact that you'd meet these young kids. Our children are our future, and boy, it's really encouraging. And we're doing similar things here now with OSIRIS-REx. They just arrived at the asteroid. They'll be there for a couple of years. We're going to explore where we can get a nice little sample from it, and then we're going to return a sample of that asteroid here to Earth in 2023.
Yeah, that's I was going to say, obviously, the OSIRIS-REx is very much in the news. The last couple of weeks. And I was reading about that actually. They're going to drill.
No, it's actually not going to drill. Not the OSIRIS-REx.
Is it not?
Now that's the other Mars lander that InSight just landed on Mars. That's a different program, and we have a few people.
I remember reading that the OSIRIS-REx is, as you say, is going to take a sample of the asteroid and return it.
Now the funny thing about it, I have a coffee mug here because what we're going to do is we're only going to spend about 2 or 3 seconds on the surface, and it's a very interesting way of how they're going to try to gather this sample. We kind of jokingly call it, we're going to kiss our asteroid.
Okay.
And the unit, the collection sample device it's on I think it's about I want to say it's 3 meter long arm that will extend down, and they will actually lower the orbit of the satellite in sync with the movement of the asteroid because it is rotating.
Yeah.
And they will approach it, and then this arm extends out, and it's kind of cantilever. It's got a flexible arm on it. But at the end of it, it has, it almost looks like we jokingly say a 57 Chevy air filter.
Okay.
That's about the size of it. And, when you're in the vacuum of space, you can't just suck something up. You're in a vacuum. So this device actually injects dry nitrogen gas. It just blasts the surface. And all around this ring, which is about the shape of an old air filter, are little collection chambers. And the debris will be hopefully blown up and captured in these chambers here, and then we can back off. And they will do a maneuver we have a minimum of 64 grams, which is not very much. But the device is capable of collecting, many, many more grams of material than that. But the minimum, NASA always has these minimum requirements in your contract. But they actually tested this device out on what we call the Vomit Comet.
Yeah,
it's a NASA aircraft, and they get a little bit of weightless time. And yes, they were able to demonstrate that this could collect a lot more than the minimum 64 grams. So we're looking forward to it. It'll be a few years before they actually will go down to the surface and try to do it, because as you can see in any of the pictures that are published on this, this thing has really got some big boulders and debris all on it. It's only about a half a mile in diameter, so it's not a very big asteroid.
It's not a particularly big rock, is it, as such?
Right. It's big enough compared to our little satellite there, but
yeah.
But on the other hand, it's about half the size of what the Japanese are. Also, they're our sister program, and they've arrived at their asteroid a little bit earlier. But I would encourage anybody that's not familiar with it, just go Google OSIRIS-REx. They have a wonderful website at the university here with the NASA folks there, and details to follow on it. But personally, myself, it's just been an absolute privilege and pleasure to be able to share, not so much with the details of what the scientists do, because I'm not in that position. It's just helping spread the word about, especially to, again, our youth. Our kids are our future. That, hey, you know what? I got interested in science when Sputnik went up back in '57, and hopefully some of the things we do today will get kids like I was back then excited.
I'm quite pleased recently because obviously, I grew up watching Apollo. My father got me out of bed to watch Neil Armstrong land on the moon as a small boy. So I grew up with the Apollo, men on the moon, all that, the shuttle. But we've had a hiatus, really, since the end of Apollo. Sure, we had the shuttle, but it seemed the ambitions seemed to be closing down. After things like Voyager, the long distance probes, and then we've had. I'm sure maybe a lot of it's been going on in the background, because obviously these things take years, so you don't just suddenly go, I think I'll send a probe to Jupiter. It doesn't happen like that, does it? But we seem to have had a bit of a renaissance. We've had probes to Pluto and Jupiter, and we have had a probe to we've landed on a comet. We're putting probes on asteroids. We're talking about going to Mars again. These sort of things. I think that's great. I think that's really important, because it felt for somebody like me who was interested in that development, that we had a terrible flat spot where everybody kind of just turned their back on it. I'm sure the people in the business of exploring space didn't, but certainly from a general public kind of view, everybody seemed to just like, oh well, we've been to the moon and there wasn't anything really exciting there, so let's just forget about it. And I thought that was terrible.
Yeah, I have to agree with you in actually being around some of that stuff. Of course, with our GPS, we were always concerned about that good old budget, and it's the same thing in industry. The politics, we went to the moon. I was excited. I thought for sure by the end of the '70s we'd have people on Mars, and all that kind of went away. And then we did this crazy shuttle thing, which started out like, well, that's interesting, but boy, when you start to understand all the politics and all the budget limitations, and it's stuff that the general public doesn't really see, other than maybe the tips of it, just whatever the news and the social media today puts out there. But again, how do you ignite that spark? Well, you try to share it, you try to get people excited about it, but how do you share the reality of, your and my tax dollars have to go to fund this thing, and your and my tax dollars get spread pretty thin. And of course, when you look at all the debt just within the U.S. here, and I'm sure across the pond there, you deal with the same thing. Is that, boy, it's like running your charge card up and keep adding to the limit. So, well, I just give me another 1,000 or whatever. But these things are in the trillions, which is too many zeros to put my mind around. And, but when it comes down to, you say, well, where are we spending that money? You want to be a good human and help out the people that need the help, but on the other hand, too, you go, it all is a very, very complicated equation that you have to deal with on this. And science, I think, is ever so important. The youth that I deal with in my outreach, unfortunately, they generally are on the same wavelength you and I are on, and that's encouraging. But so many of them that I don't connect with, it's concerning. And, you do your part. Myself, I'm in my 70s now, and it's getting a little tougher to get around. But I know I spent many a time in classrooms here over the last 10 or 12 years, working with our science teachers. And even that, when you look at it, I mean, our teachers here in Arizona, we don't pay them very much, and we're trying to improve that stuff. But again, it gets tied into that crummy, where's our tax dollars being spent? But they're saints. I mean, these teachers, they really work so hard, and I feel that I know I pay a lot of taxes, and I look at what's going to the school system, and yet when I go in there in the classroom and I go like, why is my teacher partner still having to ask the kids to have them bring in paper and supplies and that because they don't have enough in the budget to get the basic things of pencils and paper? Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because, as just a taxpayer and a citizen, all I can do is vote my vote. And,
your vote. That's the one.
And try to encourage the kids to, hey, hang in there. And teachers, geez, you're great. Stay with us, but I understand, too, if you can't pay your rent, then
yeah, kind of
something's wrong with
something's very, very wrong, isn't it? When
yes.
we have I'm not sure that teachers in this country are paid quite as poorly as some of the teachers over there, but I don't think nobody in this country goes into teaching for the money. Let's put it that way.
And that's kind of what was my feeling. I mean, I helped out, not at all looking for any monetary compensation, just seeing the fact that I maybe helped the teacher or helped a student or two in there. But here in the States, depending on what state you're in Arizona, we have several million people here. It's not the most populous state in the country, but you go over into Southern California, and that's humongous. That's 39 million people live over there. And it's the day and night difference, with what their tax base and everything else is. But even in the different cities here, we're in Southern Arizona, and they'll pay the teachers a little bit more up in Phoenix, a couple 100 miles up the road from us. But then you look at California, look at some of the other states where they have a larger tax base or whatever. The teachers are paid much better. And so ranking out of the 50 states we have here, I think, unfortunately, our state is very near the bottom of pay. And it's a problem that our governor is really trying to make an effort as best he can, I think, to ensure that these teachers get a fair paycheck. But when you're competing with 49 other states, and most of them are doing better than your state, he's got a real problem. It's life is life, right?
Yeah, that's always the way. But well, that's really good to hear. Of course, and I wondered, David, do you think? We won't go into whether we think it's right or not that it's what they should be doing, but do you think that the work by people like Elon Musk with his SpaceX and Jeff Bezos with his space tourist tomfoolery, do you think that's helping to inspire people to get interested in that sort of thing? I mean, I'm not 100% convinced that really that's the best use for somebody like Elon's money, but then again, it's his money, and also, sure, putting a mannequin in a car and sending it off into space is a sheer publicity, circus. But at the same time, you do think at least that gets people's attention. So I'm kind of slightly conflicted about that. What did you think about all that?
Let's pick on Elon right now, and I'm impressed by Elon. Elon, when you look at our video, that kind of captures the similar spirit that I think Elon is doing. He is pushing the edge of the envelope in so many different ways that I recognize that it takes great dedication by a workforce to try to make that individual's ideas happen. Some of his ideas, they really are at the edge of the envelope. But on the other hand, I have a nephew that used to work for him in the Tesla group there, and he had actually enjoyed working with it. But I think from what I can see in the effort that's going on with his automobile business, boy, that is a steep vertical climb that he's making, and he's making it. Looking at SpaceX, I'm impressed because it puts a different pressure on the government approach. NASA, in the old days, Apollo and prior to Apollo and that, they had a lot more flexibility. These test pilots really put their life on the line because they could. I've had the opportunity to meet several of the old astronauts from the Mercury and the Gemini mission days, and that when you listen to some of their anecdotes, you go like, "Wow, you're right. You could never do that today. What you guys got away with doing back then, because there would be some political regulation, PC correctness, or whatever that. Oh, we don't do that anymore." Well, I understand both sides of that equation. Well, Elon is with his SpaceX, that putting his old Roadster up there in space. Yeah, okay, it was a little bit arrogant on one hand, but he needed to demonstrate that this heavy lift space launch vehicle was really capable of doing all those things, and he had enough room in that shroud to comfortably put his old Roadster in there. He could have put just a mass simulant in there, which NASA would have done, just to demonstrate that I could lift that kind of payload.
A box of sand.
So that's a little bit of being a little bit cocky about it, but you need that spunk, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Part of it seems like tomfoolery for the sake of showing off, and then the other part of me says that it's a brilliant move because it gets it gets in the news, it gets in the newspaper. It gets all over YouTube, and of course I have to say that the Falcon, with the soft return, is I'm a bit younger than you, David, but I grew up with the science fiction of the 60s and the 70s, and that's how rockets were supposed to work.
Exactly. Yes.
That's what we all grew up expecting, isn't it? That's how rockets work.
Right.
And in real life, they didn't turn out to be like that. But Elon has said we will make them like that because it makes sense. And so. I know it's not necessarily Elon personally. I'm sure he has a fabulous team and a huge number of engineers and everything related to that. But the work they've put into that to make that work is amazing. And I will say, he's fascinated with going to Mars.
I hope he does it in my lifetime.
I really. I'm a bit like you. I've been waiting for people to go to Mars, since Apollo, and then it just kind of got dropped, and that seemed tragic. And it's almost like a whole generation missed out on that. We wasted, 50 odd years, really. Almost to the point where I've seen people in documentaries, saying that we're having to start learning some of this stuff again because the guys who built Apollo, are gone.
Yes.
And
yes.
some of their knowledge and the things they learned along the way have been forgotten, and we're having to go back and start again.
Exactly. And again, it's good to see that we have the private sector here starting to push the government-run programs into realizing that, you can be more efficient in doing these things and eliminate a lot of the bureaucracy, because it is. I mean, our government is a huge bureaucracy. I spent 37 years working with it, and it's probably not got any better. But to see the outside competition coming in and seeing what they're able to do by eliminating much of that bureaucracy, that's just, it's so encouraging. I just wish it wasn't, like you say, 50 years too late, but at least for me. But again, we need to get our youth, getting a little bit back onto just our Mac community here. One of the things that I've always been concerned with is what has happened to the user group. We have a wonderful Tucson Mac user group here in town here, but you go in there and we're all long in tooth and gray in beard, and where's our kids? Occasionally we'll get one to show up.
Them, hey, We have, I'm part of the Suffolk Mac user group here in the UK, and we've got a fairly vibrant user group. But again, yeah, I mean, I'm 55 and I'm one of the youngest people there. My daughters occasionally come along. When I was on the committee, we discussed it, several times about, why is this? But the general consensus, in the end, I'll be honest, David, the general consensus amongst the committee was, I think that Mac user groups, as it were, in a way, have had their day. That it's no longer the sort of specialist hobby that it was when a lot of us took it up when computing was new and unusual. Kids today are growing up with, with iPhones and iPads and laptops everywhere, and they don't think anything more of using a computer than they do turning the TV on. Um,
Yep.
I think that's part of it, and therefore, in some ways, the need for user groups, in the sense that they grew up, is gone. And that's why what's left is those of us who started using computers at a time when that was considered a bit odd.
Well, one of the things that I keep observing where Apple is putting these sessions together in their major stores, which I'm going, that's kind of like what we used to do at a user group meeting. And unfortunately, not every city has a major Apple store in it. And I'm going, maybe that's really the direction we need to be trying to drive our user groups into, at least emulating some of the stuff that Apple is able to do in their sessions there. But again, when you're talking to a group of seniors like myself, you get the impression that, well, no, I just came down here to socialize and be entertained for the evening. And you go, oh, yeah, I can understand that part. It does get you out of the house. It does get you around with some of your folks at your age group and that. And, some of us that know a little bit more about how these computers work can help out some of the folks that are kind of struggling. Like, I don't quite understand how to use this thing on my iPhone or my iPad. But I guess it's just the way life is moving. You're right. Social media has changed so much of the way things are handled today. Watching the TV versus watching an Apple TV and podcasts I hardly watch TV anymore simply because what's on there is talking heads or some silly thing that I don't have the time to watch. Where I can specifically go tune in on my Apple TV the things that I want to watch and to control it. So, and I'm sure the younger kids are
Oh yeah, very
much better than I am at doing that.
very much so. I mean, my son seems to get most of his entertainment from YouTube, to be honest. He watches these things which are of no interest to me, but they keep him amused. So there we go. But I have to talk about the Mac user group. We just had a meeting actually a couple of weeks ago, and we had a slightly different meeting for a change. We had one called My Wonderful Mac. And instead of having, like we normally do, one or two, fairly long presentations on some subject or other, we had 7 15-minute presentations from different people. And they were not, they were not teaching pieces. They were simply things that people say, oh, this is what I do with my Mac. And we had a guy talking about how he puts live how he runs live TV because he works in broadcast. So he was showing how adverts and various inserts are inserted into a live TV stream in what traditionally would have been done by roll VTR. I gave a 15-minute thing on how to record a podcast. We had a guy who gave us a 10-minute talk about how he makes use of the Notes application to run his life. So that was good. That was a bit different and quite thought provoking. Actually, we had somebody showing us how they sketch using the Apple Pencil, that sort of thing. Made a change.
Well, let me ask you, because we've tried similar things here with the TMUG group. but you end up with about the same 3 or maybe 4 people that are willing enough to get up in front of the audience
Yeah,
and demonstrate
that is
something.
that is a constant struggle. That is a constant struggle. But for this one, because we told people they would only have to do like 10 minutes, and they wouldn't necessarily have to answer any questions because, it wasn't a presentation in the normal sense. It was the point was, because it was called My Brilliant Mac. It was like, just tell us something that you do on your Mac. So that seemed to encourage people to come forward. We did have a young lad, Nathan, who demonstrated Scratch to us, which I'm sure you're familiar with Scratch. It's used a lot.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're
I'm
not
not.
not familiar with
No.
Scratch? Okay, Scratch is an object-oriented programming environment. It's used very much in education in the UK. So it's you code basically by plugging the blocks together.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you like, you have a start. So it works like a flow diagram, but you have like a toolbox on the side with your commands in, and you drag them out and plug them together.
Ah, okay.
So it's a it's visual. It's aimed at first coding for children. And so he basically showed us how it worked. And he built a simple animation of a sprite using it. And then he showed us some other things that he'd built, in his spare time. A chess program, which he said wasn't 100% done, but it could play 8-way chess.
Huh.
No,
Yeah,
four-way,
that's
four-way chess. I tell you, 4-way chess, on a 64, and so on. But so that was quite fascinating. Yeah, Scratch is, it's quite common in the UK. And it's open source.
uh-huh.
So if you were to search for it online, and according to Nathan, if you wait until January, they will be releasing a new version which runs purely in HTML5. So
Okay.
no JavaScript required. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you might want to have a look at that, David.
Well, one of the things that I noticed, we have a couple of grandchildren, and one is 9, and the other one is sneaking up on 11. But last year for Christmas, I splurged and I bought them both MacBook Airs, and it's just amazing. My granddaughter, who's going to be 11, she was taking classes using PowerPoint at school, and I said, "Well, have you tried using what's on your new Mac, this Keynote?" And she says, I don't know what it is." And I showed her, and I swear, within an hour, she was doing animations on Keynote and saying, "Look, Grandpa, this is what I can do with this. This is just like it, like PowerPoint." And I'm going like, how be doggone, here she was, 10 years old and making animations in Keynote and never had seen it before other than, the similarities to PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's to the point now is that I'm always curious to see what our grandkids are doing, because they're ducks to water, Roblox, I guess it's
Yeah,
called.
Roblox. Yeah.
Yeah, that's they're endlessly. I'm going, hey, put the machine down. Let's do something else. Oh, but Gramps, I got this, I got that. I don't understand what you're doing, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, Roblox is it's strange because, I mean, although it's a game, obviously, it's also popular because it allows kids to build their own games.
Yes.
Then it's a coding type of thing. So those who know what they're doing can construct games and then open them up for other kids to play in. So that's and even Minecraft to some extent. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what they were doing the year before. It was Minecraft, and
I
then they
mean,
got the
Minecraft has
MacBooks.
all this stuff with redstone, doesn't it? Which allows you to build effectively the electrical circuits and do all sorts of.
I've tried to get them to look at Swift, but they don't even. They have older iPads, and they go, we like our MacBook Airs, and Swift's not on the MacBooks.
Yeah.
So, but that looked like a real good choice until Grandpa bought him MacBooks.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh dear. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, David. We've been talking for quite a while. So what we'll
Yes.
do is we will take a 5-minute break, if you wish to refresh your coffee or whatever, and we'll go over to John in his Nemo's hardware store, and then we'll come back and we'll have a quick look at a few news stories, if that's all right with you.
That sounds perfect.
Okay.
See you in a few minutes.
See you in a few minutes. Take it away, John.
Very unusual product today in Nemo's hardware store. Company is called Bonx, B-O-N-X. The item is the Bonx Grip, B-O-N-X-G-R-I-P. Website is bonx.com. It's an all-weather, outdoor, single-ear earpiece, a Bluetooth earpiece that attaches to your ear with an integrated rubber segment that goes around behind your ear, and it holds the earpiece in place. You must see the movies and the pictures on the website at bonx.com. It's ideal for outdoor activities, skiing, snowboarding, fishing, hiking, cycling, or just about anything you're doing outside where you can use basically hands-free communication because it's voice activated. Let me slow down a little bit. It's 3 things in one. Number 1 is a conventional single-ear Bluetooth earpiece for listening to music, making calls, just doing regular Bluetooth earbud type stuff with a single earpiece. It is not stereo, right ear only. Number 2, a dedicated app that you download and install. It allows you to communicate with up to 10 Bonx users, again using the voice-activated voice signal, so there's not a lot of background noise. So for instance, when I'm on the cycling trail and Merlin is 100 yards behind me, we can talk, and we don't need to worry about shouting next to one another. Please look at the movies and the images and the description on the website and read some of the reviews. Cost in the U.S. is $140 for a single unit. This is a premium for outdoorsy people, sports people, anyone in construction. There's so many uses. When you're out in the woods, any place that you can get a wireless signal. If you lose the signal, it picks it up as soon as you grab the signal again. They describe it much better on their website than I could. Use number 3 is quite unusual. When I'm talking to Merlin, I can be doing a video, and we are talking the whole time. I can be making a video on my phone, and both of our voices, or as many voices are in on the call, we only have 2 units to evaluate, but up to 10 of the voices in the Bonx communication, the group chat, will be on that video. Imagine this for an outdoor pursuit. If you're doing hang gliding, any stuff like that, where you're out and about, and one person can be doing the video, and everybody's voice can be in on it. So the Bonx Grip is a high-end, single-ear, Bluetooth earpiece for conventional use plus group chat plus movie making. You can buy 2-pack and they come in 4 different colors. So check out the website from our links at essentialapple.com, and we are going to be reporting more on this as we use it more. We just tested it once to get our review units working with their app. I made a short movie, listened to some music, answered a phone call, did everything I needed to do. It works. The hardest part about it is making sure you get the earpiece in properly and you use that rear loop segment to get it comfortable on your ear. Everything else kind of fell into place. The app can be a bit quirky, but you're smart and you'll figure that part out. Took us about 10 minutes to figure it out, how to generate the group chat link. Well done, Bonx Grip, and there'll be more to say on this in the future. Back next week.
Thank you, John, for that rather interesting hardware store. And the Bonx earpiece is available for $139 for one, or I believe it's $260 for a pack of 2. Go over to their website in the show notes and you can watch their videos, as John said. So, well, after that short break, David, we'll have a look at a few stories. We were talking in the break, obviously, we were talking about the fact that Apple have released Watch OS 5.1.2, which enables the ECG function if you have an Apple Watch 4, at least in the US. I don't know about here in the UK. But you were telling me, obviously, we have a story here. Apple Watch user discovers he has atrial fibrillation heart issue. That was on 9 to 5 Mac. Basically, yeah, you know, unsurprisingly, he got his downloaded 512, thought I'll try out the ECG. It gave him a reading that said you might have atrial fibrillation. He didn't believe it, so he put it on his wife and did some ECGs on her, which all returned normal. So then he thought he'd better go and see the doctor, and the doctor checked him out and said, yes, you do have atrial fibrillation, and this has probably saved your life. And then the doctor is quoted as saying, I thought we'd probably see an uptick in cardiac referrals, in the next few days, but I didn't expect it to be the first thing on Monday morning. There we go. So you were saying that obviously you've tried it out. So how did that go, David?
Well, it's interesting because it depends on your finger touching the crown when you run the app. My old fingers and living out here in the desert, the moisture, I think, has some effect on how well it works. During the break here, I just did one and it worked just perfectly and said I'm healthy. But yesterday I was playing around with it and I got some really strange ones, but at least it was smart enough to tell me that this does not seem like it was done correctly. You may want to repeat it. But there are a series of cautions that remind you that, hey, this is, just a 1-point EKG, and it's not going to tell you if you're having a heart attack.
No. Consult your health professional.
Exactly.
But we've talked about it on this show before, and people have brought that up, how realistically, how helpful is it? And I think the point is that anything which can flag up a possible issue for users is good, because certainly in this country, every doctor in every A&E department in the country will tell you we'd rather have somebody turn up here saying they think they're having a heart attack and it turns out just to be indigestion than have to, be trying to resuscitate somebody because they've had a cardiac arrest in the ambulance on the way here. So,
yes.
It's great. I think it's great. Yeah. It's like saying, home blood pressure monitors are not as accurate as hospital blood pressure monitors. Well, maybe not, but if it tells you that you appear to have consistently high blood pressure, that's something that you should then consult your doctor about.
Exactly. And, the thing that I look at it at my age is that this is another tool in my health toolbox. And it's a lot more convenient. And my doctor, who is a little bit younger than I am, he's kind of fascinated by the technology. And I said, well, it's becoming readily available. And the Apple folks have, I think, done a serious job of providing some valuable tools that in the future will continue to add more value to our health monitoring. And again, I think the nice part about it, this is just one of several things that when I go in and do my annual wellness checkup with my primary care provider, I can pull out my iPhone and say, well, look, doc, these are the things that I've been monitoring. You might be interested. I can PDF, email it to you, or if you have an iPhone, I'll airdrop it to you. And I kind of think, down the road as technology catches up in the industry, we'll see a lot more of this stuff become automated, barring, the privacy issues and that they're doing. But I think Apple does a pretty good job of handling that concern.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people, certainly most people, I think, who are in the Apple ecosphere would tell you that they would probably trust Apple more than most other companies to protect their private data. The other one that caught my eye, David, obviously there's been a lot of talk this year about foldable phones or foldable devices, and Samsung, of course, have shown off their foldable, well, at least a demo item. And one of the points of concern that came up whenever we were talking about it on this show was how are you going, what are you going to use to for the screen? Because we're all thinking, well, you can't bend glass in half like that. Well, apparently, according to this article, Corning are building an impossibly thin, flexible Gorilla Glass for foldable phones. This was I picked this up on BGR, Boy Genius Reports. Corning say that they are making a Gorilla Glass which can be folded over around a radius as small. Was it a diameter? Okay, we're going to a tight bend radius. You will have to have a glass much, much thinner than what you have today. And some of the glass we have in our labs is thinner than a human hair. This was technology director Polly Chu. The ultra-thin prototype is just 0.1 millimeters and can bend almost in half like a piece of paper around a radius of 5 millimeters, which, 5 millimeter radius, that's probably about bending it round your little finger, isn't it? So, it's not quite folding it in half, but
Right.
there's a photograph of it here. I mean, that is certainly, I would say, foldable enough that you could, it would work for a tablet or, not quite sure it would work for a phone yet, but if they can get it down to, say, a 2.5 mil radius, I would have thought that would be ideal. So that was interesting. I like things like that. I'm always fascinated by that.
I think, you know what, and I hadn't seen the article, but I'm going to equate back to my days in as an engineer, and when we came out with flex harnesses, flex cables in our electronic circuits and that, and very, very thin, not as thin as what we're talking here, but the biggest problem you had in flex cables is that you can only flex them so many times, and then the electronics, which is basically just a printed conductive within the material, you start getting micro cracks and intermittence and that. So that's the vision that comes to my mind with, why would I want a folded screen?
I have to say, like you, it fascinates me. And when we had Tim Baharan on, he said, he wasn't convinced at the moment that the market, really wants foldable devices. But as he said, consumers will drive this if the technology, will no doubt improve over time. But if that's what people want, we'll soon know, because people will start buying them. And if people don't really feel that it provides any great benefit, they will fade away into insignificant.
Exactly.
But yes, what fascinates me about it is exactly that. How do you build OLED screens that can fold in half? How do you cover them? In this case, with micro thin glass. How do you stop the electronics from literally cracking up over time?
Yes. When you think of how thin the circuitry is just to connect the LEDs in an array, and then you think, I want to bend this thing a few times.
Yeah, not for people of our age, it's totally counterintuitive, isn't it? It's like, why on earth would you want to try and do that? That's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
I mean, I remember not so many years ago I had an Apple, I think it was a titanium PowerBook. It was the I don't know. Anyway, it was one that had kind of traditional hinges on the back, which stood proud of the case. And that was a nice laptop, but it had developed a fault where obviously the screen cable had to run through those barrel hinges.
Yes.
And it had reached a point where you could get it on, but you had to position the screen very carefully so that it would work, because there were certain places, certain angles at which it would work. And if you knocked it, then the screen would go out or go haywire, because the cabling, obviously, that ran through the hinges had begun to break down. There you go. There. So, but Corning apparently are working on a bendable glass. Very counterintuitive indeed, but if they can pull it off, I think that's got to be a step towards having foldable devices that are consumer popular. Because let's face it, before Corning came out with Gorilla Glass, a lot of phones had those horrible plastic screens, and we all know that was far from ideal.
Yes, it's I just added the 10R phone to my my collection of Mac items, and having the glass front and the glass back, I'm going, I don't know about this,
Yeah.
but I'm getting used to it. I did get a nice little case that allows me to still use the charging, magnetic charging there. But I said, it may be Gorilla Glass, but it is glass. And
glass is still glass, yes.
it's
As I
right.
know to my cost, my Gorilla Glass, my iPhone 7, the glass on the front is broken. It is cracked because I dropped it, and it landed on the corner, and thus. And at some point, I will have to get it replaced, but it's quite expensive to replace it, and it's not badly enough cracked at the minute that I feel that that's a top priority. No, don't.
I hear you. And our grandkids with their equipment, I go, oh my gosh, I'm so cautious about this, and they don't pay any attention, and they haven't broken it yet. But I'm going, oh, that day is coming.
It's coming. It's coming. On that note, actually, Apple have just released a clear case for the iPhone XR, according to 9to5Mac and various other people. I've had a look at this. It looks quite nice. But I have to say it is $40, which is kind of typical Apple premium price, and I'm not sure I'd want to pay $40 for a clear case to put on my phone.
Yeah, I think I bought for mine. I did the usual, hit Amazon, and I think I paid like $9 for a very nice case that cooperates with the charger. I'm just forgetting what we call the charging on.
What, the Qi chargers, yeah?
Q charging, yeah, Q charging. And, for $9, wow, Apple making a clear one for $40. And the interesting thing, I was watching one of the Twit episodes here yesterday, and Renee Ritchie from iMore was commenting that it's really strange why there is no Apple leather cases for the XR. The clear one just came out, as you pointed out, and that was it. And you go like, what's going on, Apple?
Well, I think, I mean, this is only my take on it, but my thought really is, the iPhone, the XR comes in these lovely colours: blue, yellow, coral, red, black. Why, to some extent, they're like, why would Apple want you then to put it in a leather cover and cover it up?
I didn't even think about that. That's true. People want to show off the beautiful colors. I hadn't even thought about that.
I think that is the, my phone is the jet black one. And it was the first iPhone which I didn't bother to put a case on, because it is the shiny, piano jet black case. Previous to that, I've always used a case, often a thin ice case, which is a fraction of a millimeter polycarbonate snap-on.
Yeah.
But because it was this lovely, shiny black, I didn't want to cover it up, so I didn't put a case on that one. And my next phone will almost certainly be a XR, and if I do put a case on it, it will certainly be a clear case, because why would you buy? Why bother to buy a coloured phone and then put it in then cover it up? But there we are.
I think my problem is that I think it's black, and I said, well, I could just put a nice black case on it. I don't need a clear case.
Well, that is true. If you go for a fairly traditional black or silver one, maybe you're not. But if you buy a blue one or a pink one or whatever colour, you might want to show it off. Anyway, there we go. And also, we were kind of having a bit of a laugh in the break, weren't we, David? It's 50 years since Douglas Engelbart's mother of all demos changed personal technology forever. There's a long article on Mashable, which is well worth a read. But really, 50 years. Wow. And for those who don't know, of course, the mother of all demos, Douglas Engelbart, demonstrated what we would think of as, computing as we see it now. That is, with a mouse and a pointer, with hyperlink, hypermedia documents, collaborative working, all of those things. And as they say here, this demo was not just a flash of brilliance; it was the Magna Carta, the Rosetta Stone, the Declaration of Independence of personal computing as we know it now. Very much. I mean, it's very famous. Before my time, 50 years ago. I'd been 5 years old when he demoed that. But it is, of course, famous, very famous indeed. And, well, it's a good read. It's amazing. It really is amazing. I mean, there's a picture on here of the first mouse, which is a wooden block with some wheels in it. Fantastic. The vision, the vision of the man to come up with these things way before. I mean, realistically, it was 20 years before most of the things he was demonstrating even became common. Really fantastic.
It is. When you think back of where we have come from, one of the first computers that I trained on in my early Air Force days was a Link trainer for the F-4C Phantom fighter. And that computer, using what we think today of primarily op amps, was all vacuum tubes. So this thing had just ton after ton of air conditioning just to keep the temperature constant in the bays of all this computer operations that are running in integration circuits, differentiation circuits, operational amplifiers. We used to carry a little tool that had like a screwdriver on one end and a socket on the other end, like the size of a pencil. And we called them tweakies because we would be constantly tweaking all the various circuits because of the drift due to temperature. And you look at today and we think nothing of it. I mean, I live out here in the desert and I get a little concerned with when it's 110 degrees outside Fahrenheit. Is my watch going to stop working? Well, there are limits on these things, but
Yeah.
we kind of take it for granted that, boy, was technology. I think I mentioned earlier, it's kind of the Moore's Law, how things have advanced. And 50 years ago, with just introducing how you could use something like a mouse to move things around in a graphical interface, I guess we call it a GUI interface today. Well, 50 years though. It just doesn't seem that it's been that long. But
no, but it's also fascinating. If you read the article, it's amazing that you read this and the vision, it was easily 20 years ahead. Easily, it's unbelievable. There we go. 50 years since the mother of all demos.
How about Star Trek with Scotty when he went back in time and he picks up the mouse?
Yeah.
Hello, computer.
Hello, computer. And then, of course, that's laughable in its own. It was laughable and a deliberate, joke of its own within the film because they talk to their computers, and yet, we are reaching a stage where it is possible to talk to your computer.
The one thing that surprised me, my son, I gave him my old Apple Watch as when I bought the latest one, and he said, "Dad, I don't know, whatever, I'll give it a try." And then he was over there, and all of a sudden I started getting these text messages on my watch, and I'm going, "How are you doing that?" And he says, "Just press the microphone there, and you can dictate to the watch."
Mm-hmm.
I learned something new for something I've been wearing for years. I didn't even realize it. And it does a really good job, even with my slurred speech. Hello, computer is it's on my wrist.
Yep. It's unbelievable. I mean, again, we were laughing, weren't we? In the while the Nemo's hardware store was on. And I said to you, my first experience of computers was when I was in the sixth form. A small group of us had access to the tele-type terminal, which connected to the local college, and it had a real modem, which was a telephone that you dialed up the college on, and then when it made the famous modem tones, you stuffed it into a foam box and slammed the lid down, and it was an actual audio coupler. And the programs on that were stored on paper tape, which you had to be very careful not to tear. And you told me a story about punch cards, which, to tell the listeners that, because that I think that really does kind of illustrate how much we sometimes take for granted at the moment.
Yes, this again was in my old military days, and I was at that time working on another Link flight simulator for the F-111 aircraft. And that was programmed using holograph coded punch cards. And we had just huge stacks of punch cards to program this system. And we were having fits to be tied one evening. We couldn't get this thing to load the program correctly. And it turned out, after much troubleshooting, one of the technicians that was loading these punch cards into the card reader had gone to dinner and at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so he had greasy fingers when he was handling these cards, and the grease was just enough that because the card reader was an optical reader, it was reading the greasy fingerprints as ones, where they weren't supposed to be any ones. So, yeah, it's, boy, chicken fingers got us that night.
Yeah, it's like, why are computer bugs called bugs? Because in the old days, if a moth got into your circuitry, it would short something out and everything would come to a grinding halt. Quite literally a bug in the system. Oh,
Yes.
dear. Well, what other stories have we got here, David? And I think we'll wrap it up. I'll tell you what, I've got a little snippet here, and this one is a good laugh. If you ask Siri, why are fire trucks red, you'll get a rather long and amusing answer. Yeah.
No, it may be an old story. My grandkids love this one. Why are fire trucks red? It has something to do about 2 and 2 is 4.
No, this one doesn't. But it's a similar kind of tale. It's a similar kind of tale. Somebody obviously had far too much time on their hands and programmed Siri to give you a rather interesting answer.
I'll have to play it and see if how similar it is to that long old story about why are fire engines red.
That's it. But it is so. After the show, everybody go off and ask Siri, why are fire trucks red, and you will get an amusing answer. Right, well, worth of chirps, David. I have some worth of chirps, which is where people either send me in things or I have things to tell the listeners about. Mac Jim has sent me a link to some Faraday bags for your kit. Link in the it's faradaybag.com if you want a Faraday bag to put your phone in or your iPad or whatever, so that it cannot be accessing or accessed by anything else while it's in the bag. There you go. Go over to faradaybag.com if you want your tinfoil hat to include a Faraday bag to protect your car keys or your phone or any other devices. Now, I have bought myself a keyboard protector for my MacBook. I've bought a Mozzie So, I think it is, a keyboard cover. It cost me £6 from Amazon. It's a thin skin. I'm not sure if it's some kind of TPU plastic, I think. They come in a variety. They come in different colours, and there are different models for different machines. And it just sits on the keys. It's not really designed to prevent spillages going into the machine, but obviously it would give you some protection from that. But I just thought, I think I'd like to. My other one, the keys always ended up getting grungy. They end up all nasty and crumbs. I'm always worried about crumbs and things going in the machine. So I've bought this thin keyboard skin, and as I say, it cost me £6. And they come in a variety. They also do some. They come in different colours. If you'd like to have different coloured keyboards, I've got a clear one, but you can have red ones and blue ones if you want your keys. They also do some with different symbols on. I think they have some that map to different keyboard layouts, so that like Portuguese or Spanish, if you're bilingual and want to know what the keys are on the different key layouts. So there you go. That was something I thought was worth a shout out. And I'm not sure who sent me this one. I have one here called Non-Plastic Beach. nonplasticbeach.com. There is a company who are offering alternatives to single-use and disposable plastics. One sustainable product at a time, apparently. I've had a look. They do things like, toothbrushes and a non-plastic thermal water bottle, that sort of thing. So if you want to help reduce plastic waste, go over and have a look. And this is one that John Nemo was keen that I explain. I don't know if you know, but Apple's iOS apps do not have to store their documents in their own folder in the Files app or the iCloud Drive. You can go into the settings for pages or numbers and so on. In fact, probably all of the Apple apps, and go into their settings, and you can tell them to use Dropbox or any other storage which you have available in the Files app. There's a link in here on how to do that. All of Apple's iOS apps can store their files anywhere. You just have to know how to tell them to do it. So there are, John. That was one. And this is one of my favourites. Ghostery. Now, I've been using Ghostery as an anti-tracker in Safari since Ghostery came out, I think. But I was at work the other day, and a colleague was bemoaning the slowness of a website that he was trying to access, and the fact that it was swamped in ads that he could hardly read the content. And I said to him, you should get Ghostery and turn off all that rubbish. And he'd never heard of it. And he said, can I get it for Chrome on Windows? And I said, you most certainly can. You can get it for pretty much everything. Just go to ghostery.com and choose your browser and install the extension. And so he did, and he was very pleased to find that he could then access that website, a lot faster and without all the distracting ads. And he was surprised to see the number of things that Ghostery had blocked, because it can show you a little number of how many things it was blocking. And I think it was about 30 trackers and adverts that it removed from his browsing experience. So there you go. Those are my worth of chirps for this week, David.
Excellent.
Yep. And so thank you very much for coming on. Fabulous talking to you. Absolutely fascinating. Your bio will be in the show notes. And most importantly, of course, the link to the documentary on Amazon, The Lonely Halls Meeting GPS documentary. Well worth a watch. It's really well worth a watch. It's fabulous. I think I'm not sure who it is in the documentary, but I thought they nailed it really when he described it as from obscurity to ubiquity. I thought that was
Yes, as Carl Kovacs, and Carl is quite a colorful character. He looks a lot different than I remember him when we were lieutenants together. But yes, but it was a very fitting end, and of course, Dr. Brad Parkinson, who we all feel is the father of GPS, did a wonderful job, and he looks great considering his years behind him, and that's the point I think that our producer Tom was getting concerned with, because one of our members in the video there has just recently passed away, and he said, "By God, I need to get this out before more of these people pass on." So,
it was a fabulous documentary, and I think more should be made more widely available, because let's face it, it's true. GPS, is something which is relied on by everyone all the time, everywhere now. And you guys are, unsung heroes. So there you go.
Thanks to everybody that supported that program, that didn't survive the cutting room floor, but there are many, many other people that really put their heart and soul into making it what we have today.
I'm sure. As I said, last week to Alex Sepco, and a big thank you to all the engineers everywhere who toil away making things better without ever getting any recognition for the effort they put in. So there we go. And of course, I didn't mention you are a reviewer with MyMac, aren't you? On the mymac.com.
Yes, I do. It's been a little while for reviews. It's been a little slim on what I like to review, but yes, I do have a half a dozen or so on there on my Mac. That many of them are my personal experiences with a product that I really like and enjoy and use regularly. So check it on out.
Yep. Well, I think at the moment Nemo is bemoaning the fact that review material is a bit thin on the ground. So
It's
there we are.
It is. It is tough, and we keep hounding Nemo that you better find us something a little more that we can put our teeth into, because just so much that has come out that I don't think I want to even try to review that product. It's too common or whatever,
Yeah. There we
Life
go.
be it.
Yeah, well, poor old John, he does his best. I mean, let's face it, if the if the manufacturers won't send him anything to review, there's not a lot any of us can do about that.
That's about it.
That's about it. So, what else? Oh, well, I must mention this, of course, must not. I must mention this. I mentioned Alex from Skylum. Last week, Alex gifted us 5 copies of Luminar 2019 and 5 copies of Aurora 2019 to give away. And so, if you would like to try and win one of those, send an email to essentialapple@sudomail.com. That's SUDO mail.com, mentioning whether you would prefer Luminar or the Aurora HDR. And you have to include the phrase which I gave in the show. So you have to go and listen to my interview with Alex Sepko in order to enter. And also, Light kindly gave us a copy of Live Home 3D to give away. 1 copy for iOS and 1 copy for Mac. Similarly, emailed the show mentioning the Live Home 3D and the phrase that I gave out on that show. And Light are in the double interview bonus episode. We will draw the winners for both of these competitions at the Christmas Party podcast, which we will record on the 23rd. So get your entries in before then, and good luck. Right, well, David, fantastic having you on the show, mate. Brilliant. And is there anywhere you wish to promote before we sign the show off?
Well, one, this was really fun. I really enjoyed it, Simon. And yes, I would just like to encourage folks that check out our video there about the GPS documentary, which you gave us a good plug for. And we do have, I do run a Facebook page for any of those that do the Facebook for the Tucson Mac user group, TMUG. So we try to share links with other folks that are out there, let the rest of the world in the Mac community know what's happening today. I would like to share a link to our podcast today.
Yeah, feel free.
On Facebook.
Please
do.
Yep.
We'll let the folks here in the Southern Arizona district that visit us. We don't have a very large audience, but hey, we'll make it go viral somehow.
So, if you would like to send me that link for the Tucson Mug Facebook group, David, I will put it in the show notes for you.
I can do that. I will do that as soon as we wrap up here, as how I'm multitasking.
Okay. And of course, as you mentioned, go check out OSIRIS-REx, and
yes, please.
Yeah, please do.
It's an exciting mission.
It is indeed, as are, several other missions that are going on at the moment, I have to say. Well, I think that's probably about all for this show. So, you can find me on Twitter as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. All of the shows are over at essentialapple.com. You can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, in all good podcast apps. And I think all we've got left to say now is goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks much.
The You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast, and I'd like to say if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast Tips Jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac Podcasting Network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac Podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club podcast, the geekiest show ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchot's and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I've forgotten. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
Amazon, Google, Apple, Android, iOS, Alexa, Siri, technology, sci-fi, video games, tablets, computers, flash drives, toys, weather, and general silliness. Geekiest show ever, every week on the My Mac Podcasting Network.
This has been the Essential Apple Podcast. Goodbye and thank you for listening.